I'm Himanshu, Health and Chief Strategy Officer at IP Global, a development sector focused consulting firm. It's a pleasure to have you all join today's Insight Series session, where we would be discussing the key issues of resource mobilization, capacity building, and scalability in the healthcare ecosystem, and how collaborations between government, industry partners, and academia can help strengthen this. Nath Health, as you know, is an integrator with a vision to be a credible and unified voice in improving access and quality of healthcare in India. Diverse fields of expertise such as hospitals, diagnostics, medical technology companies, and nursing associations have worked to make the forum a credible and unified voice in improving access and quality of healthcare. Playing multiple roles as collaborators, think tanks, and advocates, they have helped to forge partnerships, deepen engagements with government, shape policy and regulations, and have been our torchbearers to represent as well as safeguard the interests of the healthcare providers, even during challenging times like COVID 19. To enable this, NatHealth has been having these insight series, bringing together stakeholders from different healthcare sectors, and we hope today's session will provide us guidance on key areas that the forum needs to focus on going forward. While today's topic is huge, the discussion would focus more upon the need for collaboration, the challenges the private sector faces, and what is required to improve the quality and equity of healthcare delivery in the country. We would also try to look at these areas from COVID-19 lens and how it is impacting, and as well as setting up the stage for the much needed disruption in the sector. If you look at the country overall, over the last decade or so, the healthcare scenario has improved, but still, situation remains bleak in a number of areas. Almost 40 million people are still thrown into poverty every year due to health-related expenditure, and reasons that for that are kind of plenty. India still contributes 21% to the global disease burden. The infrastructure remains limited, with 55 beds and 81 doctors per 100,000 population, much lower than the WHO prescribed guidelines. 75% of our population, as a result, has limited access to quality healthcare, and out of pocket expenditure remains as high as 60%. At the same time, when we are facing so many challenges, it remains unlikely that the government set target of reaching to 2.5% of GDP spent by 2025 will be achieved. This is especially so when COVID-19 is expected to kind of make a dent of around 10% to our GDP itself. COVID-19 overall has thrown a number of new challenges. While as a country we have been able to spruce up our infrastructure to some extent, the real test of our health system lies ahead. As winters set in and infection rates increase in smaller and third tier cities as well as rural India, the real test of the health systems will happen. It's not that India does not have the market opportunity or the key drivers necessary to build the required infrastructure. We are one of the fastest urbanizing countries with increasing incomes and unparalleled technology penetration. Some of the factors possibly that have kind of helped us in countering the COVID-19 pandemic as well right now. Government policies and programs have also been supported. If you look at things like Startup India, Digital India, as well as the Ayushman Bharat PMJY programs, the they all have kind of led to increase in private investment as well as getting an impact investment into the space. However, what possibly is required further is the improved collaboration between government, industry, and academia to ensure that initiatives get the right level of impetus and resources for capacity development and scale up. So, given all this kind of a background, today we are kind of very fortunate to have with us a well curated panel comprising of experts in different areas to deliberate on some of these issues. Without much ado, please join me in welcoming them. To start, we have with us Dr. K. Madan Gopal, who is currently working with the Niti Aayog and has been working on issues related to health system reforms and strengthening in India for over 3 decades. We also have with us Dr. Chandy Abraham, who serves as the CEO of for ITC's new healthcare project and has extensive experience of working in both clinical as well as academic settings in India and abroad. We are pleased to have with us Dr. Shama Nagarajan, currently the Managing Director for Sahamantharan, a health sector consulting firm. She has, prior to that, over 2 decades of experience in leadership positions like World Bank, ICRA, Fortis Healthcare, and several other leading healthcare consulting firms. Last but not the least, we have with us Dr. Sanjeev Navangul, Managing Director and CEO, Bharat Serums and Vaccines. Over a career spanning 30 years, he has led a host of global pharmaceutical companies to operational success and has been part of several bodies in management and advisory roles. Thanks to all of them to join us today in this insight session, and we hope to have a very good and collaborative discussion. To kick off the discussions, Dr. Madan Gopal, may I pose the first question to you? As we know, Niti Aayog has recently done a kind of a national level sectoral evaluation for health, looking mainly at the central sponsored scheme, but also widely looking at the sector. Based on that experience, as well as your experience otherwise, where do you see the need for collaboration to strengthen the healthcare ecosystem, especially in times like COVID-19 in the country?
Okay, thank you, Himanshu, for the great opening remarks. As you have mentioned that we have recently carried out one of our arm in Niti Aayog, they have carried out the evaluation of the centrally sponsored scheme at the request of the Department of Expenditure. These reports are under submission, but the important insights which have come, I would be just sharing that important insights, not the part of the report, but being a witness to what is happening. Because that is under submission, so I can't be sharing what is there in that report, but I can share the other insights for the health sector. As we are witnessing an outbreak which started in January, we are still grappling. The numbers are going up. We are number 2 in the world in the number of cases. The surge of cases are also in the range of 30 to 70 million, 70 per million cases per day. That kind of surge is there. And we are making preparations to meet a surge of around 200 million per day in the smaller towns and 500 million per day in the bigger areas. Having said this, we have to enforce a lockdown for preparing ourselves for this COVID. COVID has given an opportunity to just stop, think what we are doing, what needs to be done, and how we can take the things forward in making a sectoral reform. Apart from that, it is an opportunity to need to transform, and at least we can think about the accessibility and affordability of the services which we are doing. We have been grappling with the issue of increasing the GDP expenditure on health, public expenditure on health. But 2025 seems to be very distant because every year we are increasing we are taking only care of the inflation. But if we talk about the expenditure has to equally come from the state side. There are a lot of reform agenda which needs to be carried out because reforms are known to be the strengths of the Indian healthcare. And we have been doing excellent reforms in the pharmaceuticals and the human resources in particular. We are the larger provider of the generic drugs and the vaccine globally. And we have also launched a scheme to boost the productivity of active pharmaceutical ingredients. That's a reform because it was a time when we were grappling with the issue of active pharmaceutical ingredients. We were dependent on the imports for active pharmaceutical ingredients. But to boost that, we are having a scheme so that the indigenous manufacture of acute pharmaceutical ingredients. This is during the COVID times itself. We have tried to see that how we take this opportunity and this. When this pandemic started, we were grappling with the issue of the PPE kits. We were grappling with the issue of the testing kits. Now, if you look at the way which we have progressed, now we are exporting the PPE kits, and now the rates of the testing kits have also come down. Similarly, when the vaccine is coming, we are trying to see that how we, apart from meeting the requirements, our requirements, we would be at least think that how we help the others. That kind of thought process is also going on. Apart from that, the public healthcare agenda is largely unfinished. If you look at the healthcare scenario in the country, is largely fragmented. That means the out-of-pocket expenditure which you have mentioned for taking care, we have to, that means a billion of people running after a million of providers for seeking care, if you put it in that way. That's a situation. That fragmentation has happened over the years. We have to see that how we can address this fragmentation. We are making efforts to see that how this fragmentation is. Apart from that, there is a shortage of the medical manpower. The COVID pandemic has added the stress on the already overburdened healthcare system. The private sector is also overwhelmed now with the cases and other things. This has thrown challenges in many fronts. The private sector, we say that it accounts for 70% of the country's healthcare. But during the COVID time, if you look at the partnership and the collaboration which you are envisaging, we are doing around 1 million to 1.5 million tests per day. But what is the contribution of the private labs in this? We have to think on that. With a lot of efforts, the private players came into this. But when it comes to the actuality, then what is the contribution? We have to see that are they meeting the expectation which have been raised out of all these things to have a meaningful win-win collaboration. Apart from that, if you look at the other public-private partnerships, particularly the CGHS, we have tried to resolve some of the issues of that by making upfront payments and other things. But there are still many other things which needs to be focused. If you look at the performance of the health insurance schemes during these COVID times, what is the claim size? And what they are doing to the hospitals during the COVID period? That's the question which we have to answer before we go into the reforms. We are talking about that how to reform the insurance sector also, because during the COVID time we found that found them wanting. Even the Ayushman Bharat PMJ program, we are trying to see that how effectively it has been utilized during this COVID time, and we are doing a review of that, how that kind of sectoral reforms can happen to that. Apart from that, one of the levers for achieving the above reform is digital health. During the COVID times, when we were grappling with the issue of taking care of the non-COVID patient, during the lockdown, all the hospitals, they were not providing any routine services. So that was an opportunity. We tried to push the digital revolution in the form of telemedicine guideline. Otherwise, teleconsultation, everything was illegal in the country. But taking advantage of the COVID situation, we have been able to push the telemedicine guidelines. And now our discussion and other things are evolving around the telemedicine guidelines. We have been pushing for the digitalization of the health. Before COVID also, some efforts were made for integration of the digital platforms. If you talk about the digital health, way back in 2009, 2010, 11, when there was an enactment of the Clinical Establishment Act, which mandated to have an electronic health record for all the states which are adopting this act. But that could not take up that much. Apart from that, for integrating, that means one program should be talking to each other. It's unfortunate that even after 8-9 months into the epidemic, how many research papers we have published? We have wealth of data, but all fragmented. To integrate that, a blueprint was made, the digital blueprint was made, and on 15th of August, a launch of pilot was been commissioned on the Independence Day of this. And now we see that how the results of this pilot would come. The second arm of the Ayushman Bharat was the Health and Wellness Center. There also a lot of information is collected. We are seeing that how these two programs talk, so that the individual identity which they are talking about between these two programs, how the data can come and how we can generate knowledge out of this data. That's the thing which we are trying to see. Apart from that, in the medtech front also, there's a urgent need for upscaling the capacities, especially in the high-end business. We are grappling with the issue. Even when we did the vaccine thing, we are trying to find out the vaccine capacities, manufacturing capacities. It's not that vaccine alone. Vaccine manufacturing capacities as well as the logistics, as well as the other consumable for the vaccine. So there are other areas where a lot of work can be done with the private sector. And it's an opportunity. It's given an opportunity to stop, revisit what we are doing, rethink what we are doing, and we see that where to go from here now. because we have to live. As you are seeing, everybody is traveling. As we are maturing, we are now having an understanding that we have to live with COVID, and we have to act accordingly, and we have to see that how we transform ourselves and take advantage of this and start improvising with collaboration and partnership with all. These are my initial comments. Thank you. Over to you, Himanshu.
No, thanks, Dr. Madan, on such insightful thoughts. And your point about stop, think, and then act, I think so that has definitely helped the country. The initial lockdowns, which are highly criticized, helped us to prepare well and take things forward. But your comment around fragmentation and the areas that the private sector and academics can collaborate with government are also kind of very insightful. And the point that you mentioned that the kind of reforms that have happened in the pharma sector and the manufacturing sector, and that's quite visible also the way India has been able during the COVID-19 times also take the initiative globally. We were initially kind of importing PPE kits and testing kits, but we are now manufacturing as well as exporting. So that's something again which is very, very inspiring. And that takes me to my to the next like Dr. Sanjeev. My question to you would be that you have been in the pharma and manufacturing space for almost 3 decades and have seen the success and been part of the success. What do you feel are the key ingredients which can be replicated to the overall healthcare space or ecosystem in the country so that the success that we have gained in those areas can be across the board? Uh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So thanks, Himanshu, and important to learn lessons on why the pharmaceutical sector really succeeded. And it succeeded because it had a lot of entrepreneurs who were willing to put in effort and money and literally, give their best to get to a stage. A little bit of help that happened at that time was, I think, India did not recognize intellectual property at that time, and therefore allowed between 1970 to 1995. There's a lot of stuff that happened on availability of medicines per se, and therefore made it a good business. 1995, the DPCO came into play and disturbed the API story, basically, which we are still seeing impact of. But I think what pharma industry did was went up the value chain. If it was experimenting with newer research, it started working with it. If it was collaborating with international companies, it started doing that. If it was working with WHO on pre-qualification things and making it an important supplier, it started doing that and building capacities to it. So over a period of time, Indian pharmaceutical industry built capability which was world class and could be recognized by the world as an important part of the industry. That is something which has to happen in all other places. It's not about capability, it's not about ability, but it's about how do we organize around that to build to that level. Do we have probably the best trained nurses in the world? Yes. Do we have the best doctors in the world? Yes. Do we really have good R&D capabilities? So look, I've worked along with Government of India and IMTech in Chandigarh on a couple of years on tuberculosis research and found the biology work there was outstanding. But the outcome of that place until then was the fact that how many PhDs they produce, how many papers they produce, rather than what is the actual outcome that benefits patients. So those kind of training that pharmaceutical industry inherited very quickly in trying to commercialize or get to outcomes is something which we need to manage across other industries and other sectors in healthcare, and the overall collaboration between the other sectors also. Probably you mentioned about NATEL is probably a rare organization where there are different industries coming together or different sectors of healthcare coming together. But there are not many platforms by which this is happening together. So how do we seamlessly intervene and ensure that there is participation of everybody? Academia, the ability of academia to partner with the private industry is dependent on the factor that how much do they trust each other. And that trust factor is very, very important. And that government should intervene and ensure that if there are any restrictions involved or if there are any issues involved in cooperation, then that should be removed, because academia and private sector should interact and do everything together without any hesitation. The the other thing that I think we tend to kind of underestimate is regulatory corridors with the international community and countries that we are friends with. We have a great relationship with the US FDA as a country and industry is basically because in pharmaceutical industries basically because we interact more often. One third of the tablets sold in the US are manufactured in India. So there is a scale and there is a relationship that is established. Do the same with our friendly countries. I don't think Indian companies are that much present in Japan, but India and Japan, and that's just because we do not have a regulatory corridor between the two governments on healthcare. Can there be same regulatory corridor with Southeast Asia? Can we do that with, let's say, some other countries in Europe where we are very, very good friends with? If we start doing some of those things, we will get all our industry to be world class and find answers on why we can't be world class in other sectors also as much as we are in the pharmaceutical industry. And that probably is a solution that we should look forward to. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Sanjeev, on those insights. And I think, again, to the point that you mentioned about having the capability and ability, but how we best organize it and how the regulatory regime allows for the best use of that capability and ability, I think so are the key things that one needs to look on as we move forward. Dr. Abraham, if I was to ask you, like from the corporate sector point of view, when we look at the healthcare delivery, what are the kind of challenges that you are seeing in this space or the advantages? Do you also see similar kind of things that Dr. Sanjeev mentioned about the regulatory regime being there and being supportive? Is that one of the big challenges, or there are other things that you see happening in this space?
Thanks, Himanshu, and also thanks to Nat Health for organizing this. I think, if you look at what the corporate sector, we've got two, because right now, if you look at the corporate sector, a large part of patients are actually managed in the private health system. But I think the sort of question that goes beyond this is the non-health corporate sector, which hasn't done very much. So most of the private players are primarily private healthcare players. There are a few people who are outside, sort of diversified multinational companies who have also moved into health, but that isn't a very large number right now. I mean, we've got maybe Tata's and the Reliance, a little bit of a foray into healthcare. If you look at where most of these corporate players can enter, one could be on the whole payer side, on the insurance side. And I think Dr. Madan Gopal sort of touched on that. And the other is on the provider side, which is actually making hospitals. And the third area is on the supply side, which could be, vaccines, drugs, all of that whole area. And I think, with universal healthcare coming into India, I think this is an area which a lot of people should be looking at, because there's going to be volumes. And for any corporate entity, one of the reasons to step into a new area is when there's going to be significant volumes. Having said that, there are challenges. Now, why should they come in? So what are some of the advantages? And, in this brief time that I have, a few things I'd like to talk about is, one is there are a lot of adjacencies in a lot of these corporate companies already. If you look at, say, information technology companies, more and more we are beginning to see a lot of information technology being used to streamline care. So, they can easily sort of bring in those adjacencies if they decide to enter into the healthcare space. A good example is, lean management came out of product innovation from Toyota. But finally, now it's also entered into healthcare. So that's again something that came as an adjacency. Hospitality industry has, a lot of parallels with manufacturing. Product companies, they already know a lot about the supplies in for production. How do you manage a supply chain, a line, a manufacturing line? So the medical technology and the drugs, vaccine manufacturing. I know a lot of the big corporate companies have got wonderful research labs. I've had the privilege to go to a few of them. As Mr. Sanjeev said, some of these labs are state of the art. They are extremely good. They need to start getting utilized into areas beyond, say, a very narrow segment of what they're doing, and sort of produce some more. There was the Rockefeller Foundation talked about something called philanthrocapitalism, where the big companies start philanthropic activities. So if you know, the Rockefeller Foundation did a lot of work in malaria, dengue, yellow fever, trying to eliminate it in different parts of the world. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when they did that, they also entered markets in those areas. So it was called philanthrocapitalism. So I think there's a lot of stuff to be said about that. Of course, we've got Bill Gates, who's now doing a lot of work in polio. It begins to give you a little better idea of the landscape that is there in different countries. And of course, it would later on lead to, if you want to really enter that sector. Is it easy? There are a lot of challenges. And I say, in medicine, there's an oxymoron, that is this constant change. So, you've got the regulatory field keeps changing. So, just when a corporate company thinks they can settle down within a regulatory framework, the regulatory framework will change. And then suddenly, they're left scrambling because they've got shareholders they report to. And I think that's the next big challenge. Very often the shareholders or the PE that invest in there often don't see the good that comes out of healthcare investment. It's seen as a very narrow focus. How do I get returns in a very short period of time? It's not, can this company have a brand which goes beyond, say, the product that they're manufacturing? Can they have a brand which is much bigger? Of course, insurance and reimbursement is still a huge challenge in India. How quickly you can get it, all the issues that come around with that. And of course, technology keeps changing so rapidly. You've got to keep pace with what's going on. A little bit about internationally, with my work that I did internationally, you realize that because people are insured, the bulk of them are insured, there is a completely different dynamic. It's, the finance companies are very acutely involved in that. And there's a kind of negotiation that takes place between the finance companies, the hospitals, and the patient groups. And just to tell you, there's one big group, which is known as a Pacific Business Group on Health, which is on the west coast of the US. It's got Boeing, Walmart, Disney, Target. They all got together and said, let's get together and negotiate for healthcare. And they're a huge group now. They even decided, okay, instead of trying to give it to somebody else, why don't we start a healthcare sector within us, which will look after our employees? And these are that can really invigorate the corporate sector involvement in healthcare. Thank you. Over to you, Himanshu.
So thanks, Dr. Abraham. And I think so you pointed out to a number of things which are quite relatable to the condition that we have in India currently, in terms of the corporate sector having the right kind of existing setups and synergies with the healthcare, but still not kind of coming in the same manner as we see internationally or international corporate sector participating in the healthcare space. There are a few examples here and there, but overall the corporate sector engagement remains low. And that too, again, I think so when we talk about the private sector engagement overall with the and the PPP space as well, that kind of remains a challenge. You would see 30-year concession agreements in the road sector, but when it comes to health, whether it's a PPP arrangement or a PE investor coming in, they're all looking at a very, very narrow kind of time frame. So that I think so that's been a challenge for the healthcare space in the country. And Dr. Sharma, if I was to ask you, you have worked with your time at World Bank and with other consulting organizations, you have focused a lot on the PPP space. Uh, what do you feel have been the major issues there? Because while government has put in a lot of impetus on PPP in healthcare in the last budget, also there was announcements around having district level hospitals set up on PPP, over 100 districts and so, but you don't see the uptake from the private sector or the corporate sector coming forward to take those up. What do you feel have been the challenges in this space over the years, and how can they be addressed going forward?
Yeah, thanks Himanshu for the question. It's pretty important, and I commend NatHealth for having picked up this webinar series. So if you actually see the PPP scenario in health sector, I don't see this as a new phenomenon. It's a continuation of a similar phenomenon which other sectors did face, and healthcare was to the extent a bit later that we started. So therefore, we are going through the same phenomenon which other sector faced in terms of its maturity and evolution as regards private sector partnership and public-private partnerships are concerned. So what we started early in late 90s, if you see, it started with outsourcing of services and all of those kind of things. We went ahead to build, operate, transfer models, build, operate, manage models. So one of these models which have been pretty successful in last decade is basically the PPP around diagnostics and dialysis. Across states, I think that has worked pretty well. Now, if you see this particular space, you would realize that the services in here are pretty standardized. The activities that have to be done are pretty standardized. And the expectation from both sides therefore become much more clearer. And if you see in this particular, in this particular space, you would realize that herein, the government's existing resources was not used. Government gave a land. Government said, okay, I have land pieces with me. You please come in and put in facility. So the technology and funds was brought in by private sector because that is where they were good at. And because there is a standard set of services, it was easy to have a structured relationship and which went on. Now in this entire thing, if you look at from the government side, government with its socialistic mindset will always say this and we'll have to accept this as a fact because government's mandate is not to make profits. Government's mandate is reach out to the masses. And in order to reach out to the masses, it will say either I be a provider and try to subsidize cost for my people by providing care myself. So therefore it becomes free of cost to the population that I address, or in a purchaser model, I say, okay, there are certain rates which are already there, that is the CGHS rate or ECHS rate, and I take up or purchase services at those rates. So this is government's way of thinking. And what Dr. Chandy said, that is what is very important in private sector to understand, that a private sector will go typically to those places where I see there is a volume. Wherever there is a volume, pharma has been a huge example. The pharma sector success is actually reflector of the enabling environment where the demand existed and private sector entered in to fulfill that demand. So there was a demand for a quality, affordable, generic set of drugs, and therefore we could fulfill that demand. So I call this typically as demand generation from resource angle. This is where private sector can fulfill pretty well. So wherever that minimum level of guarantee or that set of population is there, it will work well. So if you see the tier 2 cities today, you've got most states which have experimented on diagnostic chains, dialysis centers pretty successfully. Some of the things which have not been successful, you will have to understand. Let's look at that case, where we have not succeeded. Say, for example, giving a complete hospital on an operations model. Okay, UP did a beautiful operations model where it said, okay, I invite private sectors to do an operations for the hospital. Now here it is important. Unlike other sectors where capex is huge, in the health sector, it is not capex intensive to that extent. There is definitely capex involved, but it is primarily opex intensive, because to maintain that operations at that same level, maintain the resource and the technical stream at that same level is an equal challenge, which in the other sectors, the technology can bridge a gap to a certain extent, which is not the case with health sector. So therefore, you can probably look at some kind of a hybrid model. If you see, the road sector came into a very hybrid model. Road sector earlier started having a capex model where you have a fixed payment to the private parties, and then you have tolls which were being done. But later they realized that the maintenance and all of it was taking a toll. So they created a hybrid model of annuity and fixed both. So somewhere the government now needs to look at health sector in that fashion, that now health sector will also have to be looked at slightly differently from its usual traditional PPP model. So we cannot look at health sector in the traditional PPP format, but look at the PPP into a more hybrid model, learn from the cluster-based approaches that was there with health sector, especially in the pharmaceutical sector or diagnostic build, operate, transfer model. And whenever you are having these kind of financing, that is where the private sector comes in much more closely. Now you can look at the COVID example. Now, so this is one area from where you are coming from the policy reform side, that you create that enabling environment for private sector to come into that place. Because now if you look at tier 3 city, I mean, we have to understand that as a fact, that unlike other developing countries or even developed worlds, the PPP not working for healthcare service provision is a fact globally. It's not that it's a new case for India. Okay. So if you actually look at that, in a country like India where is not having a paying capacity, how do you expect the private sector to come in the bottom of the pyramid? Can a cluster-based approach work? That is where if you have a cluster of primary healthcare center, cluster of health and wellness centers, so some good performing, some bad performing. So then that is where a private sector is able to manage the volumes and the margins that it can offer, right? So that is where, that is on the policy side. Now, if you look at one more issue in the PPP, is the preparation for a PPP. Now, if you look at most of the PPPs that we come on, we hardly do a detailed feasibility study, whether this PPP is possible or not. We do not have transaction advisors taken on board upfront in most cases. There are very few cases where you will see, wherever you have seen that the transaction advisors have been there, you have done a detail where government does its own costing. It takes to run such a center, then it works very well. That you look at the nuances, say for example, mobile medical units on a PPP mode in UP has worked pretty well. Why? Because government had done an assessment well in advance that what is it takes to run a center like this, what are the equipment which has to go in, what is the load on the OPEX, and therefore if I were to put at this charge, then how is that a private party going to come in? How is that he is going to make some money out of it? So this entire preparation is very important. The better we are prepared for a PPP, the better it will be successful. So if you look at, I'll give you an example of PPP in other cases where medical colleges and all. If you look at that kind of a PPP, it does not work well, because in that kind of a PPP, in the current medical college situation, which if you look at, there are a lot of capping. Can it work there? I don't think we have answered that question very well. Unless we answer that, we won't be able to break ice in that sector. Look at skilling. Government does a fantastic job in terms of having Skill India program where you are creating highly skilled employees, right? Whether it is paramedics, nurses, all those categories. Who are the takers for this? If you ask a private sector will say, I would rather take a fresher from the college, train him at a lesser cost and take him into my organization, rather than taking upfront from the market a skilled person who will come to me at a higher cost. If in such a situation, government creates a mechanism that, okay, I am creating an enabling environment for picking up all these trained people. You look at that, how many private sector players will come into this segment. Look at the COVID example, the way COVID was handled in Odisha. Overnight, the entire stadium was opened up. You picked up all the skilled people who were getting trained in skills in nursing, and all of them were brought in and were put in to take care of these set of patients. So what is this? there was an enabling environment which was created for getting them into a new job. Now look at ITIs. ITIs was also similar kind of a model, right? What you see in Skilling India. So I think that is where it is important. One is preparation for a PPP, creating two, an enabling environment, and three is looking at PPP as a policy in its totality for health sector slightly differently, because herein we cannot have so much of standardization. I'll stop with this and yeah.
No, thanks, Dr. Sharma. Very important points that it's very important to prepare and have the right enabling environment. And I think so the third point that you mentioned, that health cannot be compared to all other sectors and you need to have specific policies when it comes to health PPP. And I think so that's been one of the reasons one keeps reading about that the lack of private sector using the viability gap funding that's available from government under the health space, because it's very difficult to kind of streamline all the services and put a cost mapping on each and every service when it comes to healthcare. So definitely specific policies are required for that area. Let me just ask you one more thing. You have been also looking at the quality issues in the healthcare space in the country, doing a lot of accreditation work as well as assessment both in public and the private healthcare space. Where do you see similar kind of challenges coming in there also, or the story there is slightly different? You mentioned about the lack of skills or being available. Is that a challenge, or there are different challenges as well, which government and academics definitely can come in and try to bridge?
Yeah, so if you look at the accreditation assessments, I think it's all interlinked. Here also you see similar challenges. So if you actually look at viability gap financing, it's not just, as I told you, that it's not just the capex which is important in health sector, it is the opex which is also equally important in health sector. So viability gap financing per se does not entice a private sector to get into a investment in partnership unless and until there is a visibility as to I will be able to sustain myself. It's a value for money assessment that we typically do, is what is important for sustenance here. We are not talking about even profitability, we are talking about sustenance. Even that has to be evaluated like that. So if you look at the accreditation environment and the assessments, both in public and private sector, you will see one of the major issues is today availability of quality manpower. Government is making huge efforts in creating infrastructure. Today in our country, we don't have dearth of money. Money is there. We have got huge funding coming in. Government's own investments are increasing. That is no longer a problem. Even private sector has got a lot of money. It's not the question of money. It's about the capacity, the capability within the system to be able to deliver what we want. So for example, if you look at the medical colleges, we have created so many medical colleges. Do we have enough faculty to train? That's number one question. We have so many district hospitals. In most hospitals, you will see that there is close to 30 to 40% shortage of specialists and medical officers, nurses, close to 50%. So we have infrastructure. We did a study for Andhra government, the erstwhile Chandrababu Naidu government, to prepare a Vision 2029 for his government. And we saw that 50% of the beds under the level of district hospitals was staying underutilized. Now I'm adding infrastructure, but existing infrastructure for me is underutilized. Why? Because I don't have the requisite qualified manpower at that level, at the peripheral level. So now here the question comes in, is that what makes people to stay in a particular place? It's a very important question, significant question to be understood, that where does quality come from? In healthcare, the quality primarily comes from the people that serve the population. Where does that come from? That comes from the fact that if you actually look at the health sector, here the doctors or the top of the pyramid experts do not draw their power from the position that they have. They draw their power from their social affiliation. I am Dr. So and so. I am liked by so many people in and around my community. So doctor does not like a kind of a job which is transferable in nature.
Right.
Doctor would typically like to stay in and around their own areas, excepting for certain specific set of people who have come into administrative cadre. There they are behaving more as an administrator rather than a clinician per se. It is very important. Again, if you look at the lower down the pyramid, the model of pay for performance like for ASHA workers works well, because for that it works well. But the same cannot work at the top of the pyramid, because the top of the pyramid will try to see what is the academic excellence, because at the end of the day you cannot allure a doctor by saying that I give you 2 CR, 4 CR, 1 CR, whatever the package is. Private sector gives them a lot of money, but even then, the clinicians, if you typically see,
Right.
they look for academic environment, academic excellence, opportunity to actually enhance their skill, opportunity to academically or intellectually challenge themselves. This environment is important. The other
Important
thing
to
which
have.
is
Yeah.
important that we have found in our studies that we did in UP and other states, we realized that most of the clinicians are saying that we are open to a performance appraisal system. What we are worried is there is no transparency in the appraisal
In the
process.
system, right.
Yeah, so you are too bureaucratic and you are transferring people left, right, and center. Contractual systems are not encouraged in the medical profession
Yeah.
because they look for more, because they are intellectual masses, they look for more
Right.
stability in order to give more time to be able to think. If you don't know what happens to my job after a year, I
After
am
then you
not
are always,
thinking.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
so at the back of my mind, there is no belongingness to organization that I settle with.
Sure.
And inherently, what has happened is because of the contractual employees that we have provided through NHM, the regular employees, the contractual employees incidentally get a higher pay than the regular
Higher
staff.
pay than the
Okay,
regular
so
staff, and that
yes,
also kind of
yes,
creates
yes. So
no,
that
very, very, very,
offsets
very
the
valid
regular,
points. Yeah.
yeah. So that person also feels that I have given so much to
Right.
the department and so much to the system, and look at
Yeah.
this young boy draws
So
equivalent to mine. What is that?
right, right. Yeah,
It
issue.
basically,
That those issues are very, very pertinent, Dr. Sharma. I think so. Uh,
yes,
I
yes,
think so, and a lot of points that you mentioned about having a look, focusing on OPEX as well as looking at the performance issues and all. Dr. Ibrahim, you earlier mentioned about the lean management systems. Quickly, if I was to ask you to reflect, does does the adoption of lean management system address some of these issues of both quality as well as workforce management? Like you worked with Narayana Hrudayalaya as well, which is well known for its cost-effective healthcare delivery. So, do you feel that those kind of systems, if adopted more widely, can help?
Yeah, I think the operational word here, which Sharma alluded to, is viability. Now, when you look at viability, the statistics say that if you look at waste within a healthcare organization, 90% of the processes are actually considered as non-value, and only about 10% is value. This is a phenomenal amount of non-value which is sitting inside. So if you can start, pulling out all that non-value, you'll slowly start seeing your viability threshold will start becoming
Threshold
less and
increasing.
less. A lot of our hospitals, the definition for value in the healthcare sector is something for which the patient is willing to pay. And I always ask people, is he willing to pay to wait in the waiting room? No. Is he willing to pay to fill up a large number of forms? No. He actually comes there to see the physician or the physiotherapist, and that ends up being the shortest bit of his period that he's in the hospital. So lean management, what we try and do is to try and streamline that to make the whole system more viable and also reduce the kind of variability that is there. It sits on 5 principles. One is define value, then map the process, create flow, make sure that it comes through pull and not through push, most of the processes, and move to perfection. That is, try
Right.
and make sure that you get a very good first time yield. It's not that you keep, doing a process, first time it doesn't work, try it again, do it a second time. Try and get a first time yield. And I think one of the critical pieces, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to just talk about one critical piece is innovation. You have to have an innovative mindset. And what I found, after coming back to India is I looked for innovation incubators inside hospitals. Do you know how many hospitals in India have innovation incubators? I could find only 2.
Possibly.
Most of the innovation incubators are sitting inside product companies because the companies want to push their products. So if you look at all the big healthcare product companies, they've all got huge innovation incubators. Now you will say, isn't it true that innovation is still taking place? I believe that we need a scientific approach to innovation. Have an incubator, do some prototyping, and then try and roll it out. And a combination of lean along with a good innovation mindset within an organization, it will start getting better.
So, Dr. Madan, my question to you would be more on a macro side that sometime back we were talking about looking at health as part of each and every policy that the government works on. And given the COVID-19 situation, which has impacted each and every area, do you feel it's the right time to make a push for that?
Hey, the government has already initiated a push in this direction in the form of Atmanirbhar Bharat, wherein a lot of infrastructural corrections and other innovative things have been pushed, right from the digital space to the infrastructure space, in the form of Atmanirbhar Bharat. That's already been pushed. Okay, apart from that, if you recall the experience of having the H1N1 epidemic during the 2009 and 10, where the similar kind of situation was there, and after the epidemic was over, and everybody has forgotten where to go. But in case of COVID, it is not going to happen because the way the epidemic is progressing, every other day is a new challenge. Apart from that, in the macro sphere, now everybody is talking about health, right from mathematicians to physicists. Everybody is talking that if they talk about the predictable model, that means they are at least into health. They are talking that how the COVID, every other day we receive proposals saying that in this way you can handle the COVID. That means the thought process has started in the community, in the society, in all the intellectual academia. They are now trying to find out that how they can help in combating the COVID. Where be it technology, be it with engagement with the social enterprises, be it with engagement with the community-based organization. Everybody is trying to find out a way to see that how they can contribute. Nevertheless, the most important thing which we are not considering is the appropriate behavior. We are all talking about the COVID. We are all talking about how the technology can help. We are talking about how the communities can come forward. We are talking that how we can make an equipment another thing to tackle the COVID. How an app I am developing can take care of this. How I can extend my home care service. All the things are happening. But the bottom line, which is till the vaccine comes, is the appropriate behavior, COVID appropriate behavior that is missing. That's the macro side. But I would like to respond to the earlier comments on the viability gap funding, because that's an area which have been talked and which have been pushed aggressively on many occasions. But what is this viability? Why we are calling viability? Because if you look at the healthcare project in any of the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, currently we are pushing that thing. And we see that how, because if Ayushman Bharat is implemented in the full, if the utilization happens to the fullest extent, that is 3 to 4% of the assured population, they start availing services, PMJ services. Do we have adequate beds or not? How we can have adequate beds with the existing system sustain the requirement which is thrown by this PMJ? No, we don't have. We require at least 15 lakh beds. For that, this thought process is going on how to incentivize people in coming for making this investment into the healthcare. That thought process is there, but there are many issues. The hospital sector has been given an infrastructure status right in 2017. But how many people they have utilized it? We don't know. That's the status. We have been fragmenting the already existing fragmented system. We are having mom and pop hospitals which are coming. Banks are very willing to give loans to them because they know, as Sharma has rightly pointed out, the clinician wants to stay at a place. He wants to see that how the social network increases.
Right.
The result is that, and we all talk about from the administrative point of view that so many doctors and doctor want to make a relation because he want to grow there. He want to grow with the society which is going. If you look at the hospital, it's not the hospital alone. He's employing people. He's allowing the ecosystem to grow around that hospital.
Right.
I'm just saying this because if we are targeting investments are being targeted, we are targeting that reform. We see that how we factor on that. Apart from that, the macro level, we are trying to see that how the organized sector insurances they become more effective.
More
We have to
effective.
see that how it becomes a reality because during the COVID time, now the system is getting into fatigue. We are just trying to flog the tired house. People are partying around. I have seen a good the people are partying around today, but they would be overviewing the system in the coming days because the cases
Right.
are going to increase.
Agree.
And if you look at the way the virus is behaving, we don't know in which
We
direction
don't know
it will take.
which direction it may go. True. When you pointed
Okay.
out the right thing that the behaviors need to be looked at as we talk
Yes.
right now that COVID specific behavior
Okay.
change
That's
needs to
that's I
happen.
really.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
But I think so what you also kind of mentioned is till the vaccine comes, and that I think so brings me to my last question to Dr. Sanjeev. Till the vaccine comes has been discussed, but what happens when the vaccine actually hits the market? How prepared do you feel country like India is for effective distribution of the vaccine, and which which is something which you feel that could make it a success or derail the entire process if you don't do effectively?
So I think I must say that Dr. Madan Gopal would be more involved in how this policy is shaping up. But from whatever I know, because of being involved around, I would first agree with Dr. Madan Gopal is that look, vaccine is not panacea. It's not going to solve every problem of yours. We need very, very good implementation of mask. Today, mask is the vaccine. Yeah. We also need to keep working as we are also working in our organization on trying to find more treatment options. It is extremely important to find more and more treatment options so that we make patients safer, recovery beds better, and the death rate drops. And the clinical management, which is also improved over, if you look at last 6 months, clinical management in the country and globally has improved dramatically with steroids and low molecular heparins. The basic patient management in hospitals also have gone substantially better. So all this is required together along with vaccines to manage the situation in the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months for us to really see a much better situation. I think that we should not discount and we should not say that a vaccine will solve everything. Yeah, I think that's some messaging that we need to do, that just because a vaccine is launched, that doesn't mean everything gets over. Yeah. Then capacity and capability wise, India is well positioned in terms of vaccines. I don't think we have much of an issue there. But what issue we will have is government, because of public health reasons, will do procurement of vaccines, and that has to be laid out very well, and that work is going on. I think very good discussions are going on, and it will come to a point of fruition properly. But we should also allow vaccines to be distributed privately. The reason is that there could be people who can afford and who want to take their own decisions and want to get vaccinated. Now, allow them to do that. That reduces the load on the system. Don't take that load on the system. The next thing is on deployment. How do we deploy vaccines? At again, a policy around who gets it first and all. There is already again government policy which is working on it. Reasonable conclusions they have had and a good, I think, set of understanding guidelines they have had. The next one is the cold chain. I think different vaccines have different cold chain. There are very few which are 2 to 8 degrees. There are many which are -4 to -20, and there are some which are -70 degrees. So cold chain has to be managed well. We do not have a great track record there. Private industry will have to play full role, and government will have to rely on private sector to do most of it. And government must trust and rely on private sector for that. Also, delivery. You will require certain level of healthcare professionals to be involved in delivering actually the last mile delivery to the patient. And that needs to be worked out very well in advance. If training needs to be done, we should do it much in advance. Vaccines are delivered in this country very often, so it's not that it is an overwhelming training or something, but literally to ensure that everything is managed well. These are things which to me are very important. I feel currently from whatever discussions I am having, government is well seized of many of these things. A couple of things where I think they might have to pay attention. One is that allowing private sector to vaccinate, if not keeping everything to themselves and not forcing that only public health distribution will happen. That will help reduce the thing. And second is enough management at the last mile. I think I do believe that we have capability, because if we can hold elections of 700 million voters in this country, I think we can deliver the vaccine also. I do believe
as well.
in that. But on that happy note, let me stop.
Thanks, Dr. Sanjeev. I think you made a very valid point that government is doing a lot in this space, and hopefully the remaining points that you mentioned also will get addressed in the vaccine comes in. But the more important point that you mentioned is that vaccine is not the only solution. We have to look at the entire ecosystem again and address the clinical challenges, the treatment challenges that we are still facing with regards to COVID, as well as the other infectious and diseases and all. I think it's been a very interesting discussion today. Unfortunately, we have kind of come close to the time that was allotted for us. The topic was quite wide, as I said in the beginning, and we could continue discussing these points maybe for another few hours or weeks or months, and still the situation will demand more discussion and more deliberation to reach to the right solutions. But hopefully, this will be a good starting point, and Nat Health team would be able to take forward some of the suggestions that came from the panel and use that for their advocacy and communication work. With that, I would like to thank each one of you for sparing time for this session, as well as thank the Nat Health team for giving us all the opportunity to come together and discuss these issues. And I'm sure the Nat Health team will be in touch with you to get more insights about the things that you mentioned and take things forward from there. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.